Ladies and gentlemen, it is often said that to cover one lie, you have to tell 1,000 lies. For the last 3 years, that is exactly what China has been doing. One lie after another to cover its tracks on the coronavirus. For the last 3 years, China has pretended to be morally outraged every time it was claimed that the coronavirus was engineered at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Some said it was leaked accidentally, others said it was a deliberate leak. China's and its allies like the WHO dismissed all of this as a conspiracy theory. But whistleblowers in China, researchers and scientists around the world kept collating data bit by bit to prove otherwise. Today, we have another piece of evidence to share with you. An interview with a whistleblower who has spoken to a researcher at the Wuhan lab, and his name is Shreya Dhoundial. What Chow told the whistleblower is something that confirms what the world already suspected. That the coronavirus was an engineered bioweapon that... I'm using the word deliberately based on the interview of the whistleblower. The explosive revelations were made in an interview to Jennifer Zeng, who is a member of the International Press Association. In fact, Jennifer is joining us on the broadcast from the United States of America. Jennifer, good evening to you, and thank you very much for joining us. I just want to tell our viewers, before we start this interview, that you have not spoken to the researcher at the Wuhan lab. The whistleblower you spoke to has spoken to the researcher at the Wuhan lab and the researcher you name in your interview. Can I ask you, Jennifer Zeng, what is the most extraordinary thing that you didn't already know, given how closely you've been tracking COVID in China, that stunned you speaking to this whistleblower?
Of course, the very most important piece of the thing he told me was because he talked directly with Shan Chao, a researcher, and he just got promoted to the vice director of Wuhan's P4 lab. So Shan Chao told him in person that he was given 4 strains of coronavirus already completed, artificially engineered a coronavirus in February 2019 for him and his team to test and select one that can infect as many species as possible. And he conducted experiments on animals, including monkeys, ferret, and I don't know how to say that, and mice with human genetic, some kind of ACP raptor. So they conducted the test on these animals and finished their test in May or June of 2019. So that was the most astonishing revelation I ever heard, because this is the first time ever we have a direct admission from a researcher, and an important one in Wuhan Institute of Virology, about involving in engineering and testing and selecting the coronavirus. And he personally called this coronavirus a bioweapon. I confirmed with my interviewee is that what the word he used when he talked to you, and my interviewee said, yes, that was the word he used. So this is the most, I think,
Jennifer,
astonishing piece of information.
Astonishing part.
Yes.
Okay. So Jennifer, what you're telling me is this. Jennifer, you're telling me this, that officially, the first case of coronavirus is detected in Wuhan, China, only in December 2019. But as early as May, June 2019, the Wuhan Lab of Virology, the Wuhan Institute of Virology was already testing the coronavirus. In fact, this researcher who you name in the interview was tasked with testing which of the 4 virus strains was the most virulent, that spreads the most easily amongst humans and animals. So that is scary. All this while, China has been morally outraged every time it has been said, backed by evidence, that China has engineered the coronavirus at a lab in Wuhan. They were using it as a biological weapon. Today, we have a solid piece of evidence to corroborate that. Jennifer, that is what you're saying. I want to ask you, what else this whistleblower told you?
Yeah, there are two other very, I think, equally shocking information. Of course, that is not as solid as this piece of information. One is that during the 2019 military world game in Wuhan, Shan Chao, this researcher in Wuhan Institute of Virology, noticed that several of his colleagues went missing from their normal workstations. And several days later, one of his colleagues told him in a very vague language that they were sent to check health or hygiene condition of the hotels where the athletes from other countries stayed. Because, Shan Chao figured you don't need a virologist to check hygiene condition of a hotel. So he highly suspected they were sent there to do something related to the virus, either to spread the virus, or he actually used, my interviewee used a very special term, which I actually didn't quite understand, inoculate or something. Later I asked him to explain that word. It just means to spread or to try to infect people with whatever method. It can be, injection, it can be by touch, it can be just a very general word to spread the virus. So that's just Shan Chao's suspicion or speculation, because he doesn't have any hard evidence. The only fact he knew was he noticed that several of his colleagues went missing during the military world game, and one of them told him later that they were sent to the hotels to check hygiene conditions of the hotels. And another piece of information was equally shocking was this time Shan Chao sent messages to my interviewees while he was already on a plane that was going to fly from Wuhan to Xinjiang. And he told my interviewee he was sent there to check health status of the Uyghurs, the prisoners in the re-education camp, so that they can be released earlier if they're healthy enough. Again, that was the message that he sent. Again, because you don't need a virologist to check the health conditions of the inmates in the re-education camp. So my interviewee understood he was sent there to do something related to the virus, either to spread the virus or to observe how the virus is doing among human beings. So that was my interviewee's speculation. And since that, he lost contact with Shan Chao. And before that, Shan Chao had an agreement if he lost contact, Shan Chao. And also, actually, Shan Chao was worrying already that he could go missing after this. So they had an agreement. If my interviewee lost contact with Shan Chao, he could tell the world what Shan Chao told him. Since Shan Chao didn't contact him since after 2020, April 2020, after he was sent to Xinjiang. So later on, my interviewee tried to expose what he was told by Shan Chao.
Okay, so Jennifer, let me just recap for our viewers what you have just told us. What you're telling us is something that we haven't heard before. We've heard that there are enough researchers and more who believe and confirm to the scientific community that China was developing coronavirus as a biological weapon. Some said it leaked accidentally. The whistleblower you spoke to has told you that it wasn't an accidental leak. Actually, 4 strains were tested. It was identified which is the most virulent strain. And then this strain was taken to international athletes who had gathered in Wuhan for the military games. Somehow they were infected with the pathogen so that they could carry the pathogen back to their respective countries. So you're saying this was not an accidental leak, as some people have put it. This was very much a deliberate leak that China did to infect the world. Can I ask you then, Jennifer, why the whistleblower spoke to you, and why the researcher spoke to the whistleblower? Because, you know, we know how things work in China, or at least we think we know how things work in China. Actually, no one does. But the researcher was taking a great risk in saying all this to the whistleblower you have spoken to. Why do you think, you know, the researcher had decided to speak?
First of all, I'd like to clarify some issue. The facts I present is just what Shan Chao told my interviewee, that he did the test or selection on the virus, but we still lack evidence to prove that what he tested or he screened was exactly the one that caused the global pandemic in the past 3 years. There's still lack of evidence or links between that. The solid facts is we know Shan Chao was doing tests, and the scientist in China was, you know, artificially engineered coronavirus. That is the hard evidence, and to spread the virus to the athletes from other countries is just Shan Chao's speculation based on the fact that several of his colleagues went missing during the period. But that is still not hard evidence. But I think, as I said, as my interviewee said, it's a piece of the whole puzzle. If we know one more piece, it helped to for us to figure out the entire truth little by little. So this is another very important solid piece of the whole puzzle, but it's still not, there is no direct evidence to show that what caused the global pandemic is exactly what was done by Shan Chao, although he himself, I think, he believed it was. That's why he chose to tell my interviewee, because he felt very, very guilty seeing people dying around him. You know, in March, when he talked to my interviewee, the situation was very, very bad in Wuhan city. A lot of people died in Wuhan. So he felt guilty, and I think it's in a very emotional state of mind. He chose to tell my interviewee that he was involved in this testing. I especially asked my interviewee, do you think Shan Chao believed what he tested was exactly the virus that was causing the pandemic or the epidemic in Wuhan? And my interviewee said, because the genome sequence of the virus was published in February. Okay. And as a virologist, Shan Chao must have understood when he saw this sequence. He has done tests on this virus for so long, he recognized it immediately. So that's why he felt very guilty. So it was, so he was trying to say,
so
Shan
Jennifer,
Chao himself believed.
You're telling me the Wuhan researcher, so you're telling me that the Wuhan researcher, Shan Chao, spoke to the whistleblower because he was feeling guilty with the amount of death and destruction he was seeing around the world, given the fact that the genome sequencing of the coronavirus had been established. The researcher at the Wuhan lab who spoke to the whistleblower was absolutely certain that the virus that was tested and found to be the most virulent by the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the virus that ultimately was the strain that ultimately spread across the world and caused the sort of mayhem that it did. Jennifer, I'm going to leave it there for the moment. This is an important piece of evidence, I would say, as far as the spread of the coronavirus is concerned. Of course, tomorrow we will see China step out and once again deny everything that the whistleblower has said, but we now know better than to trust China. on anything, whether it's COVID or anything else as well. So Jennifer Zeng, thank you very much for bringing us this piece of evidence and for telling us and giving us evidence on something that the world already has suspected for a very long time. Jennifer, thank you very much for your time here on Mirror Now. Thank you.
Thank you.